Blade Runner 2049. So this is a film he made in 2017. The IMDb plot summary: young Blade Runner K's discovery of a long buried secret leads him to track down former Blade Runner Rick Deckard, who's been missing for 30 years. I brought this in here because, again, this movie on paper to me should have really resonated. I'm a fan of the first Blade Runner. We have Roger Deakins, one of my favorite DPs, was involved. Hans Zimmer was doing the score. It's a movie that had been rumored for a really, really long time. The Blade Runner sequel, what would they do? And it just like didn't work for me. And I think help me realize like why there's this like disconnect between me and Denny visually. I think I want to talk a little bit about that piece of it too, because again, Deakins is one of my favorite DPs, cinematographers. Shot a lot of my favorite movies, a lot of Coen movies,
Hmm.
etc. And I have to say that it must be something about how Denis like sets up a shot like visually. His eye just isn't the same. This isn't the same as mine in terms of what I want to see visually. And this is the movie that, because I was anticipating, oh my God, it's Blade Runner, it's Deakins shooting this. And it's not to knock it. This is something that's kind of hard to kind of articulate. I think with this, it's either like you are in love with how someone shoots something or you're not, or what a director's eye is. So like, for example, like a Michael Mann or Terrence Malick, for me, I mean, they could shoot people crossing the street and I would think it's the most amazing thing in the world. Like, it's not really even about the material, just how they look at the world, like, does it for me. And this movie was like, for me, it's like, okay, well, Denny doesn't. And it was actually kind of surprising in Dune 2 was the first time there were a couple visual moments that I felt that like, holy shit, like this is incredible, like visually. And I've never felt that from any of his other movies, even when he's working with one of my favorite cinematographers in Blade Runner 2049, which upon rewatch still just is kind of boring to me and
Yeah.
not interesting really at all. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Blade Runner
But
2049?
so can I ask, like, visually, the thing that felt like a mismatch or what have you for this specific movie, like, what is it?
It's again, it's hard to articulate, but the shots just seem to me like kind of flat, not interesting. That the camera movements aren't directing my eye in the way that I would want them to go. Again, it's hard for me really to articulate this. It's like it's like a painting, right? You look at a painting and sometimes it speaks to you, and sometimes
Mm,
it doesn't. And you can't really describe why. And it's just interesting having a DP that normally, like, I love what Deakins does, and I guess. And now I'm thinking, well, it must be how Villeneuve likes to compose his shots, that it just, not that I don't like it, but it doesn't really give me that extra oomph that other directors, like I mentioned, that are very visual. Because as I mentioned in the podcast before, like movies are to me like more of a visual medium than anything else. So I really gotta like be in love with how they're shot. That's why I keep mentioning DPs and cinematographers all the time, because it's in a way that I kind of
hmm.
tackle films. And it's just I don't for me, just Denny and I don't line up in that. Again, not that I'm saying he's bad at it. It's just not what I would
Mm.
like.
Interesting. Yeah, for me, like, visually, this movie felt amazing, and I'm, no scholar on cinematography, but it felt like the world building and the transportive nature of it, and kind of just getting lost in where they're at, like that all felt amazing to me. I think to me, and I agree, the movie sort of feels kind of boring, and it felt
Hmm.
boring when I watched it, and probably have very little intention to rewatch it over time. Maybe I should though.
Yeah.
But to me, like, the boring part of it comes from obviously the storytelling and pacing, but then also the performance, I think. I think this is
Yeah.
my time where I started to really just be bored of Gosling in general. Of
Hmm.
like, okay, you're brooding and you're sort of, kind of in on the joke or what have you, and everything is sort of serious and, First Man and this one. And I don't know, it just felt like back to back of the same kind of droopy character, like walking around.
Mm.
That to me was, not fun and interesting. And then whatever Jared Leto is doing, as
Yeah.
he's always doing in most
Yeah.
of the movies that he's in. Not to say what he's doing is bad, but I think often it seems like filmmakers don't know how to use him or calibrate the movie around him. Then, often he's described as, yeah, he's in like a different movie. Like that's
Yeah.
often is what is said about him. And once again here, I was more interested in the movie when he came because I was
Mm.
finally, awakened, but at the same time it's sort of jarring. So I don't know. And look, the first Blade Runner was not a big success when it came out. It took a lot of time for it to develop. It's also slow and kind of takes its time and such. So
True.
I don't know. Maybe this one over time will land on me differently. But yeah, I'm not fan of this one.
So interesting on the performances. Actually, on this rewatch, the only performance that really popped for me is Ana de Armas was just
She's great.
great in this, and like, and their relationship was the only thing I kind of cared about in the movie.
But I was going to say that I think, as we said before, this movie is important because it's a critical, incremental, huge incremental step towards Dune. And
True,
for
true,
that, I'm appreciative that this is in his filmography. Like he got to tackle something of this size, a much beloved property that's not
right.
entirely his own,
Hmm.
and keep that going. And there's probably no Dune without this.
That
And I'm happy that he got to try this one out and then got to Dune as opposed to trying Dune directly, and maybe it wouldn't have worked as well. I'm clearly you can see this is a very smart filmmaker who learns from the stuff he's trying and then applies it. So for that, I give him a lot of points.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think he had not worked with IP before this, and
No,
Dune is obviously a massive IP, so maybe this helped get him his feet wet in that world of playing. I mean, not that he's done adaptations before. Like,
right,
I think both of the movies we just were talking about before this were
right,
adaptations, Prisoners and Arrival. But yeah, I think that's a really good progression for him towards this. It's like everything leads to Dune. It
yeah,
seems like is what we're saying. But hey, that's nothing wrong with that. Dune's good. So.
exactly.
Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.